Hi, this is Mark from Wiki Design. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you exactly how I created this SVG animation using SVGator and Illustrator. Now let's just jump into how I created this. So now we are inside of Illustrator, and what I'm going to do in this tutorial is kind of briefly go over this part inside of Illustrator, but you do need to export all of this kind of as is in order for this to all kind of work. So what you can see right here is we have the outline of the blue, which is actually what's going to get drawn on. And then inside the middle of each one of these blue areas, we have the stroke. So basically what we're doing in this animation is we need to animate the stroke right here, and it's going to draw this on. So it's all done through like masking and like animations. So the most important part is making sure that your stroke is always right in the middle of your outlines right here. And then what you're going to also want to do is, if you look on my right column right here, you're going to want to make sure your layers are really organized. And it's best to have it kind of laid out like this. You could also move these blue outlines so they're all in one big list. You definitely don't want to have each one of these like in nested groups or anything like that, because when you import it into SVGator, it might not work correctly, and it's just going to make it a lot harder to manage. So it's best to kind of strip everything out and just kind of lay it all within one big kind of like layer right here. So as you can see, I just kind of have all of these things labeled. We have the W right, W left, and the I, if you watch the animation again, it just kind of like fades in. So I'm not going to do a stroke effect on this little dot up here. And one thing I ran into is you can actually have your strokes extend past the line. So you don't have to have it where it's inside the line. In some cases, I ran into some issues with SVGator. It's okay to have like the stroke on the outside of your like outline right here. So you may want to go ahead and just kind of make sure it extends past, because when you draw it on, it might not get these angles correctly. And then once you're happy with how everything's looking, what you can do is just go up to File, Save As, and then we're going to save this as an SVG. So I'll just give this like a unique name up here, hit Save. I'll just replace that one. And then you're going to want to make sure the settings are pretty similar to this. You can just keep this at 1.1. You're going to want to make sure, if for some reason you have SVG fonts or something, you may want to convert this to outline, embed. And then I'm having the decimal places at 5. This is kind of like the detail of a curve. So you may want to increase that if you run into any issues. And then just hit OK. Now we're going to jump into SVGator, and we're just going to import that SVG. Okay, so here we are inside of SVGator. I just created a new project, and then this is where we're going to go ahead and upload the SVG. So just go ahead, choose the SVG right here. And then when you import it, you should see right here, this is what I was like, you should name the layers now in Illustrator, because when you import it, you're going to have to change them anyways. So as you can see, it imported everything right here. So all of these are the strokes or animations, and then the outlines are all right here. So I actually need to go ahead and label these. Okay, so now we have everything labeled right here. Now let's go ahead and let's start with an easy one. So the C is going to be nice and easy. And then any of these other ones are a little more complicated. Any of the ones that kind of like have two of them. So the W, the K, and the Y, because anytime there's overlapping, you can kind of run into some weird little like layout issues. But I'll go ahead and show you how you can start with an easy one like C, and then we'll move on to a more complicated one. In order to do this, we need to actually move a few things around, and I'll show you how you group things and then mask. Okay, so the first step is we need to, let's go ahead and pull the outline out. So this is actually the blue, and just pull it underneath the other C. So I have this C outline, and let me go ahead and just rename that so you can understand which one I'm on. So this is actually, let's call this stroke, and then this is the outline down here. So the outline is the blue, and then the stroke is going to be how you draw it on. So what you need to do is, anytime you have any sort of masking, you need to make sure that the mask is always on the top layer, and then the outline, what you want to draw on, is on the bottom. So what you do is you select both of them, hold down Shift, right click, and then right here it says Create Mask, and that's it. So when you do that, you're going to see the outline is gone. So the mask is here, but it's not doing anything yet. So it's completely just, it should make your letter just disappear. So what we need to do is actually animate the offset. So this is really simple to do, but you have to follow these steps exactly. So select the stroke. So this is going to be the line that draws on. Go ahead and select that. Then right here where it says animate, just go ahead and click that. And then you're going to want to choose stroke offset. Then over here on the right panel, what we need to do is at the beginning of the keyframe, right here where it says length, click this copy to, and then this button where it says offset and dashes. You need to make sure that that's enabled, and nothing's going to happen until you animate it forward. So let's go ahead and say in 1 second, I want to draw on the C. So then what you need to do is at the 1 second mark, you would just hit 0 for offset, and that's it. So now you go ahead and you can see the offset is going on just like that. So technically this is working, but what we need to do now is increase the thickness of that stroke and then get rid of this like opacity that it has. So while that's still selected, go back into the beginning frame. And if you look right here underneath your fill and stroke, this is your stroke where my mouse is. Go ahead and click that color. So as you can see, when you click that, it's like a dark color. What it needs to do is be 100% white. So if you've worked mask before, mask is basically like white and black is going to determine if the mask is on or off. So with white, that means the mask is going to be on. So just make sure you go ahead and just move that all the way to the top left, or just type in FFFFF right here, and that's it. And now on the right side where this says 2, I know that the thickness of these letters is 14 stroke. So inside of Illustrator, whatever you kind of use, so if I go back into Illustrator, so whatever thickness you have for each one of these like outlines, you're going to want to make sure that your stroke is around the same size or a little bit bigger. The mask can be bigger. So if like you wanted this to make sure it covers all of this, you can make it like 16 or something like that. That way it will cover it all. So now let me just go ahead and jump back into SVGator. And like I said, we already changed this to 14. So now when I animate, you're going to see it's actually going to draw on the whole entire stroke right here. So let me go ahead and just visually show you. So let's say you have it go down like 13. You can see, if you look right here, I'm just hitting the down arrow. This is the thickness of your stroke. So 14 is usually pretty good in this case. I can go a little bit bigger if I wanted, like 15. You could see it kind of will tighten that curve up a little bit. So it's not bad if you need to go like a higher number, like 16. That way you make sure that your curves are 100% accurate to what you have. But when you go ahead and you start to do this, the thickness of your stroke, when you start to overlap, you might run into some weird like glitches and all of that. But that's it. So that's basically how you animate on a mask. So again, you have to make sure that the mask layer is above it, and then you're going to right click both of them, create mask, and then you need to make sure you do those extra steps. So animating the offset is what's giving this that stroke on effect. So now let's go ahead and move to a little more complicated one like the W, and I'll show you any sort of overlapping issues you might run into. Okay, so it's going to be the same process, but like I said, when you start to overlap these things, you might run into some issues with like the thickness of your stroke. But let's go ahead and give this one a shot. So in this case, what we need to do is actually have the W twice. So this is all, the blue is just kind of one outline. So what we need to do is actually right click, and then you just go to copy paste and duplicate that. Then let's just go ahead and let's start with the right side. So you can see right here we have the right stroke, and then we have the whole W. So it doesn't matter. You don't really need to like cut the W right here. You can just keep it as whole. Select both of them, right click, and then we need to go under create mask. And then we just kind of follow the same steps. So this mask needs to be white instead of that dark color. And then we need to change the thickness to 14. And then the most important part is you need to animate it, because without animating it, it's not going to do anything. So stroke offset. And then same thing, you just go over here to the right, copy to, offset and dashes. And then let's just keep everything the same at 1 second, and then just hit 0. So now if I animate it, you're going to notice that it looks like nothing's happening. So what you have to actually do is go down here underneath your outlets or your outlines and go ahead and actually turn this other W off. Because if you remember, we have this other W. So that's actually getting seen. So we need to actually just turn that whole section off. So we just kind of isolate ourselves into this. And so now when we animate on, it's going to animate that on correctly. So as you can see right here, it's all animating just like the C. Now let me go ahead and zoom in right here and start to show you some little like issues you can have when you start to stroke like this. So you can see right here when it animates on, the thickness of this stroke is continuing with that other part of the W. So one way to fix this would be you would go back into your Illustrator file and then like separate that part of the W so you don't run into this issue. Or you can go ahead and actually just use the pen tool within here, add a few points and kind of just pull things to the side. So let's go ahead and do that as an option. But the better route, if you have something really complex like this intersection right here, you might want to just go into Illustrator. It might save you more time. But let's go ahead and just click this button right here. This is the pen tool. And you can see we just kind of have this point and then it kind of curves right here. So there's really nothing I can do to make that go away unless I add more points. So you can go ahead and click this arrow and click the add node. And let's just add one. Let me see how this will work. Let's just add one here and then add one right here. That way we have plenty of points to work with. And then you can zoom in. I'm just using my mouse to zoom in. And then if you hold down your mouse button, this is how you kind of click and hold it. Then go back into your regular pen tool. And so now you can see we have these 2 extra points. And what we could do here is actually just click and you could drag it over. Click and drag it over like that. And then, like I said, you might need to actually pull some of these like anchor points around. So on a Mac, I'm holding down the Option key and you can go ahead and actually click and start to move these curves around. So I can go here and maybe when I move this curve, that's actually going to help a little bit more. Go here, move this curve. And then this might be a case where let's go ahead and actually just add another point right here. That way we don't mess around with the top part. Go back into here. And you can see when I go and drag this and that, you can actually maybe move this all the way over. That's why I'm saying when you start to zoom in on these things, you're going to notice these little wonky things, but it might only be like a pixel or two. So maybe it's not a big deal, like something like that. It might be okay. So if you zoom out, I mean, you're not going to notice it. And then if I kind of go up here, let's go to the same thing. If I just zoom in right here, let's go ahead and add some more points. So let's just add one here, one down here. And then we probably just have to move these in. So if I select this one, you can see that's going to move that in. And then, like I said, you don't want to move too much because then it will start to mess around like down here and stuff like that. So let's move this point in. And then if for some reason you're having a lot of issues doing this, because as you can see, it could be kind of time consuming, you could always decrease your stroke if you don't need it to be the same width, for example. So if I just decrease that, you wouldn't have to worry about that. And then you can see in the situation when I try to correct it right here on the left side, it's not giving me the ability to actually extend that because the line just isn't far enough. So one cool little trick is over here. If you click on, while you're on the stroke, you can go ahead and click square. And then this is going to just kind of cap it off. And then you should be able to kind of tweak it from there and fix any issues. So now we can go ahead and make sure that animates correctly. So now we can move on to the left part. And then it's pretty much the exact same thing. So if you remember, we have the other W outline right here, so we can turn that back on. And if I open up the folder, you just click on it. This W right here, we can just pull it underneath the other one that says W left. And then just follow the same steps. It's good to kind of do this a few times because it is like kind of like a lot of different steps. So go ahead and select that, right click, go to create mask, and then let's go ahead and just kind of do the same steps. So while the stroke is selected, make sure it's white, and then let's change that width to 14. And then what we can do is animate it. So hit animate the offset, stroke offset, go over here, offset the dashes and the outlines, go here, and then it goes to 0. So this one a little bit easier. It just kind of curves, goes up, and then we might have the same issue. So let's go ahead and just see if we can click and drag this over. So you can drag it over, but then, like I said, try this little trick right here, and then you can see it should extend it. So that's just kind of extending past the, the path that you have. And then that's it. So zoom out, and then you just basically can just do the same thing. And then if you want to stagger this, so if you want the left to draw on first, you could just animate that. have it where the left will go ahead in first, and then the right will go ahead. So you can play around with how you want it. And then here's one cool little trick I figured out while I was learning this is if you animate it right here, you can see it starts from, like, let's say, let's focus on the left part of the W. It starts here from the top and then will animate down and then into the loop right there. So if for some reason you want it reversed, what you actually have to do is change that inside of Illustrator, and then you're going to have to re-import that outline. So let me show you where you do that. So you just go into your Illustrator, and while you select your path right here, if you just go to Object and then underneath Path, there's this toggle right here called Reverse Path Direction. So when you click that, nothing's going to happen. Like, it's not going to visually show you anything. It's not going to say anything. But now when you re-import that, it's going to animate from the bottom part right here up into here. So I did some research. There's really no visual cue either in SVGator or Illustrator where you can tell like where the start point is of these strokes. So I found that a little confusing, but once you do that, you can go ahead and re-import it, and then it will animate the other way. So what I'm going to do now is just open up the exact file I showed you in the beginning of this tutorial. I'm going to show you how that looks when you can draw on a gray and then just kind of have the blue overlay. And then I'm going to show you how I exported it. And another step you're going to have to do if you want to import this animated SVG into a WordPress website. Okay, and so here is the final version of the one I showed you in the beginning. As you can see, I kept everything very organized because, as you can see, if you're not very organized, it can become a mess really quick. So in order to just draw on the gray first, so let me first animate this. All you need to do is just literally duplicate everything and just change that fill color. So I'll quickly show you how you do that. What you do is first, let's just start with the right part of the W right here. I have the blue first and then the gray. So if I open up the gray right here, pretty much all you have to do is just copy the version where you have the gray first. As you can see, I just called it a copy of W. You would just go underneath over here, and then this part right here, you just need to change that to the gray. And then what it's going to do is animate the gray on first and then the blue. So if I go down here and I click on the mask, it will show that's actually starting at frame 0, and then it's animating, it's like right here. And then if I go to the blue, go right here, it's going to be offset. So you can see right here where my mouse is, this is the gray, so it starts first, and then it just draws on the blue. So I just literally duplicated that whole process we just did, and you just import it right there. Now, if you really want to go pixel perfect and nitpick, you can see right here, when you start to do these overlays, you might get 1 pixel right here. And to fix that, it's really simple. All I did was, let me close this all down. So once I close all that down, you can see I have this right here called the fill opacity. So what we need to do is, when it's at the end of the animation, just get rid of that gray color, like completely. Because technically it's there, but anytime you have elements like overlapping each other, you might get into this issue where like it's kind of like fighting for its like dominance, like who's going to be at the top, the blue or the gray. So sometimes you have to manually fix these things like at like 1 keyframe. So that's what I did here. When it's about done with the animation, so if I scroll right here, you could see where my mouse is. It's still 100% gray, but then once I go over 1 more keyframe, that 1 little pixel is going to go away. So you can see over here, it's just going to go away. What I had to do for that is you just select the gray outline that we just changed, that color, that fill color. What we need to do is just click on Animate, and then I did a fill opacity. So right over here where it says, there's going to be one in here called fill opacity and fill color. So I already have this called fill opacity. And then right over here, you just change it from 100% to 0. So if I go to the keyframe before, we're at 100%, and then right afterwards, we're at 0%. So if you start to see, you start doing these overlays and you get 1 pixel off, that's how you fix that. It's a tedious process, but sometimes when you zoom out right here, you could see it a little bit. I'm not sure how well it's come across like in the YouTube video, but yeah, that's how you fix those little tiny things like that. And then that's it. I just kind of have it animating to 3 seconds. So now I'm going to jump into how you export it, and then the one extra step you may need if you want to put this on like a WordPress website. So one thing I recommend is definitely there's a save button right up here. You're going to want to click that often. So anytime you do like a major change, like any tweaking of paths and anything like that, just go ahead and hit that save button because that's going to be important. So I'm just using the free version here, so I highly recommend this tool, but if you want to play around with it, make sure everything works. I like that they give you that option, and then you can even export the like SVG animation. It's just going to have a little watermark in the corner until you pay for it. You just come in here and then re-export it. But let's go ahead and just choose SVG, and when you do that, it's going to show you how the animation is going to look. And then this is that little watermark right down here. And then what I like is you could change the speed of this. So if you wanted to be like double the speed, you could just type in 200% and then you can click like refresh preview and it's going to go twice as fast. Let's just go ahead and just change it at 100. So I want it to be like at 3 seconds. So like 1, 2, 3, it finishes. I recommend, if you can, just animate at the speed you need. You don't want to rely on the speed thing over here too much, but this is how I have everything set up. I just export as this file name just for a test. You're going to want to make sure SVG format is animated because this one's not static. It's actually animating. You could do unique right here. It's just exported. You don't have to worry about that unless you're diving into SVG code. Animation type, I'm doing JavaScript. You can play with the CSS version, but it might not support all of the animations. That's kind of gives you that warning. So let's just do JavaScript on load. You have to pay extra if you want to have these other features. I recommend embedded. It will increase the file size by like 34 kilobytes. If you do external, the website will always have to like be online, and I just like dealing with everything internally. It's only 34 kilobytes. And then that's it. You're just going to go ahead and hit export, and now you're going to have your file exported. And when I open it, this is what it's going to look like. It's going to play it right in the browser. But then one limitation is if you're introducing something like WordPress, what it does is it needs to strip down extra code inside of that SVG in order for it to render correctly in WordPress. Now, if you're not using WordPress, you might be able to just take this SVG and just kind of embed it like you normally would, like an image or something like that. But let me go ahead and show you the steps that you need to do in order to grab the code and then actually just import it into your WordPress website. And I'll leave a link to this page right here. This is from SVGator directly. And so they kind of introduce some of the things I was talking about. So once you download it, if you're not using like WordPress, you could just use an object tag right here and just kind of reference your SVG, and it should work pretty good. And then same thing with like HTML5. Sometimes an image tag, probably more if it's static. I don't know if it works with animation. It says right here it might work, but it might be broken in Safari. So the foolproof way if you're going to use WordPress is there's this option right here. When you click that, it's going to actually give you this little generator down here. So if I scroll down here, it's going to give you this little converter. So now I'm going to upload that SVG we just created, and I'm going to show you how you take the code and put it into WordPress. What it's doing right here, it took me a minute to understand it. There's code that's inside of an SVG for security reasons. WordPress will strip out, and so what this is going to do is prevent that from happening. It's going to make it where your code's actually going to work. It cleans up the SVG, so it's more like WordPress friendly. Now, you could do two things. You can either download the SVG again or just hit copy SVG code. Me personally, I love just copying the code directly. That's one less request on the website, and it's all kind of like integrated. So now let me go into the website right here and show you where you just paste that. So inside of Elementor, I'm just going to open up a new tab. And then here I just have a basic container. And then inside that container, I'm using an HTML tag. And then you literally just paste that code in right here. And then that's going to work. So if you don't do this step right here, it's probably not going to work. A lot of trial and error. I couldn't get it to work unless you run it through this converter. Because like I said, WordPress is doing something to those SVGs while it's being imported. So there might be plugins to fix it. I do know that SVGator does have their own plugin, so you could just use their plugin and then reference the animation that you just created. That way you don't have to mess with this stuff. So you can either download their plugin or take this extra step and do this. Me personally, I love having just the code right here within the website. Because if it's in the HTML container, you can just leave it as is. And then from here, you can go ahead under advanced. I can start to customize the widths and everything. So that's why I like doing it this way. And that's it for this video on how I was able to animate this logo right here using SVGator and Illustrator. And some of the things I took away from doing this project is you got to be very organized, very, very organized. Because if you don't name these layers correctly, once you start to do the animations down here, you're not going to know which one you're on. So that's one of the biggest takeaways. And then, yeah, just kind of make sure that inside Illustrator, your files are nice and ready. So when you import it in here, you won't have to go back into Illustrator and re-import it back in. But yeah, I had a lot of fun doing this, and let me know in the comments below if you want me to make more animation videos like this. Again, this is Mark from Wiki Design.